Welcome back. Today we are talking about the wisdom within joy. Did you know that there's wisdom in joy? Well, there is, and I am excited to detail the biblical ways that that is true. Welcome to my channel. My name is Tiffany Lee, and I teach people scriptural principles that help them align their life so their lives can bear the fruit that God made them to bear. I'm so excited that you're with me today for this very exciting topic of joy and wisdom. I love studying productivity, efficiency, both in time management, also in home organization. And I tried years ago the KonMari method, which swept the nation. I don't remember exactly how long it was ago, but I read the book, the best-selling book, and tried to organize my house of too much stuff along the principle of joy as she suggested. At the time, and it wasn't that long ago, but at the time, I just thought it was so bizarre. I don't even know why I thought it was so bizarre looking back. I just couldn't get onto the bandwagon of the idea of joy. And I think part of the problem was that nothing in my house brought me joy. None of my objects, all the things I kept did not bring me joy. So there's that. But I recently found it at the library and checked it out again in interest. I don't even remember why, but just to go back to that idea. A lot has changed. I've found God's grace and just a lot has changed. And so I was reading the book. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Why shouldn't I be surrounded by everything in my environment that brings me joy? Like, that is so bizarre that I would have not liked this idea before, that I would have thought it was so far out. And then I'm following her method and the exact process of how she wants you to do it. First clothes, and then books, and then papers, and then miscellaneous stuff. Now, it's a process and it takes a while, especially if you have a lot of stuff. So you go through in categories. And so I've been through a couple categories at this point. And I have been ruthless in my ability to discard things that I could not discard before. And as I gave into the process and decided that, yes, I do want to be surrounded by joy, I began to get the sense of what I was surrounding myself with before. When I tried this method before, every time I keep an object in my house, instead of donating it or trying to give it away to someone, the thing that I have valued highly in collecting and keeping my things is utility. Can I use this? Can I use this? Well, yeah. Can I use this? Yeah. I mean, basically, what I have learned after decades of collecting and keeping things with the value of utility is that you can use anything, especially if you're an artist like me and you get joy from turning something useless into usefulness. So then, because of this, specifically for me, this artistic creative quality, I become surrounded by this huge amount of possibility and projects, unfinished, unstarted projects. One day I'll get to them. And what that ends up creating is stress. And it's just been so stressful. And while I haven't wanted to give things up, I've wanted to blame my environment, my circumstances for not allowing me to keep my stuff, for not having a big enough house to put all my stuff in. I began to realize that I want to be surrounded by joy. And maybe joy is less stuff. As in my research right now, a huge theme is that all problems are interpersonal problems, meaning all problems are relationship. As I bring up my daughter, I realize that she is the most important thing in my life, and it makes it a lot easier to throw everything away as I feed into her. And as I was doing this process of taking an object, and maybe this was the woo-woo part of it. Now, I love woo-woo, so anyway. But I'd take an object, I'd put it to my heart, and I'd close my eyes, and I'd feel inside if this object would bring me joy if I would keep it. And most of the time, I would feel this dead weight, this deadness, this like slump. No. And then I'd keep holding it to my heart, and I would imagine throwing it away, donating it to charity. Someone would pop into my mind to give it to. Would that bring me joy? Immense joy. Joy would fill my body at the thought of throwing it away, giving it away, or donating it to charity. Immense joy. It brought me immense joy to clean all of my things out. And it worked magically. It worked very quickly in the categories that I focused on. I got through a lot of stuff quickly. The longer process was pulling everything of that category out in one place. The easy part was joy, no, joy, no, joy, no, joy, no, joy, yes. Keep. And she says in this book that it doesn't matter if it's a little scrap of paper and it brings you joy, keep it. And then at the end of the process, you find all these little creative ways to use all these things that bring you joy. Decorating little tiny places on the hangers so that everywhere you look is joy. And I just love that process. And that got me thinking afterwards about my value of utility and how I had placed that so highly in my life and how stressful that had become and how hard I had to work to make that happen, and not just in my stuff, in my work. It made me connect it very closely to something that we talk a lot about on this channel, which is works. We either are in the flesh and under the law and busy working, showing our works, our self-righteousness and our works, or we're in the Spirit and we get all the lovely, beautiful fruits of the Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, meekness, temperance. And all those just flow off of being in the Spirit and in the presence of God. And the word joy in the Greek is kara. And that is directly derivative of charis, which is grace. So isn't that crazy that works and the values surrounding it were literally my value when I organized, and it created stress. But when I organized my home around the value of joy, it brought in grace. It cleaned out the place. It looks much better. It's much emptier. I can find the things that actually bring me joy instead of plodding through the closet. No, this will do today. That so struck me because I saw it in every area of my life. But I also saw that in this whole process, that there was a wisdom in joy. There's an innate wisdom in joy, which was so surprising to me. Joy, the definition, is gladness, cheer, and delight. it bowled me over, totally surprised me, that when I found this scripture in Proverbs. Now, I love to pop around in translations. So, of course, I was in King James for a while, but now I'm even pre-King James in Geneva. I love the Scriptures 2009, which is a literal translation. I really like the more literal translations because they seem simpler and closer to the idea than the later translations that try and make it simpler, but kind of muddy the idea. Bowl me over when I'm reading Proverbs 19:8 in the Scriptures 2009. And of course, I've read the Proverbs a lot of times. The Proverbs is all about wisdom. But in this reading from the Scriptures 2009, it says, "He who gets heart loves his own life. He who guards understanding finds good." And I thought, he who gets his heart. I had to stop a second. Wait. What is another translation for this? Because that doesn't sound familiar to me. I've heard it differently before. Sure enough, when I go to the King James Version, it's "he who gets wisdom loves his own life." Lab is the Hebrew there, heart, and wisdom. And that so fascinated me that wisdom could be a value that we could navigate our life through. Because it doesn't feel intrinsic to this world, certainly. In this world, it seems like, and we're told in our religions, that we have to suffer a lot, and we look really good when we suffer because that's self-righteousness. And that's honoring God. Is it? If being in the presence of God gives love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, goodness, meekness, and temperance, is showing a sad face, is that really glorifying God? Is not celebrating what we've been given in our body, in our life, our abilities, is that not, should we walk around moping, thinking it's hard? I don't think so. I don't think that's the divine design. I think that's the worldly design. And it makes us look good. We look self-righteous, like we're suffering for God. Paul waltzed through the whole New Testament in joy. I mean, literally the joy spills off the page when Paul is talking. And he says we have to suffer, but he's not suffering. His life is going through things. In Acts, he is imprisoned for 2 years. Then they put him on a ship, and the Jews are trying to kill him. Imagine that. And they put him on a ship, and God tells him the ship's going to sink, and it does. And he goes to an island, and the snake bites him, pops out of the fire while he's feeding the fire wood. And the natives say, "Oh my goodness, he must be a murderer because the snake bit him. He's going to die." And he doesn't die. Though he is a murderer, he did kill Christians. He was a Jew who killed Christians. But he didn't die because he was in the Spirit. He was under grace. The law no longer applies. Galatians 5:18. And if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. You're not under the law. That's scriptural. That's from Galatians. You are not under the law. What? But I want to go murder. Really? Is that what you want to do? If God gives you grace and gives you all your greatest gifts and gives you love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, gentleness, the first thing you're going to do is go murder? Is that what's going to happen? No, that's not what's going to happen. Grace begets grace. I'll tell you what's going to make you want to go murder is if you are in the works of the flesh. Let's go to the next verse after 18, Galatians 5:19 through 21. Moreover, the works of the flesh are manifest, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, wantonness, idolatry, witchcraft, which is pharmakia, sorcery, hatred, debate, emulations, wrath, contentions or strife, seditions or division or creating dissension among people, heresies or disunion, envy, murder, drunkenness, gluttony or revelings or partying. Those are the works of the flesh. That's what you get in the flesh under the law. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into this idea that joy, there's a wisdom in joy. Let's unpack this definition of heart in Proverbs 19:8. It's lab, means wisdom, feelings, will, intellect, or basically the center of everything. Your mind, your understanding. So, and for us codependents, this is a beautiful illustration that we keep our heart. We don't give our heart to someone else because the heart is the seat of our wisdom, our mind, our intellect, our understanding, our feelings. We cannot give our heart to someone else except to God. He's the only person we can give our heart to that we still keep it, and actually it multiplies. So give your heart away equals codependency, or keep your heart and move in the spirit, and that's when you can tap into this well of wisdom that is in your heart. And this is where we hear God speaking to us. We don't hear God speaking through fear. If we're hearing fear or doubt, the Bible has a don't fear for every day of the year. So God is not speaking to you through fear or terror. It is God's highest will to take away your fear and terror, no matter what is going on. Psalm 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord and let him give you the desires of your heart. Oh my gosh, is that prosperity ministry right there? Heart, but not flesh. Heart, not flesh. We can contrast this heart versus the flesh with Ephesians 2:3. We all once lived in the lusts of our flesh, doing the desires of our flesh and of the mind, dianoia, and were by nature children of wrath, as also the rest. So there is a difference between the desires of our heart, which link to our spirit, and the desires of our flesh, which are just worldly and passing and meaningless and leads to death. They lead to death because they don't hold life in them. The Spirit holds life in it, and that life continues eternally. And every time that life touches something, it lives anew in the in the next person. And this is how we hear from God, is through the fruits of the flesh. Through, I would argue, through joy. God says in Jeremiah 33:3, call to me and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things which you know not. So how is he going to show us? Is he going to terrify us in bed at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night? No. Does God speaking to you fill you with faith, hope, and wonder, and wisdom? Or does it fill you with fear and doubt? If it fills you with fear and doubt, shut it down. That's not God. I grew up in a household that really revered Solomon. And Solomon was the most prosperous man on earth, probably ever. And when he was young, God asked him, tell me what you want, and I'll give it to you. Do you want riches? Do you want power? And he said, I want wisdom. And that so touched God's heart that he gave him all of it. Wisdom in Proverbs is worth more than gold and silver. Because wisdom is what you use to figure out how to get the gold and the silver. Wisdom is how God leads you into your land of freedom and prosperity. Wisdom is key. So I was a little manipulative when I decided, well, I'm going to do what Solomon did and ask for wisdom and get it all. And from that moment that I said that prayer, and I was young, I got the sense of God speaking to me in like kind of images that I would see in my heart, and questions that would come up in my head that I don't think I was smart enough to ask, that led me to research that just deepened and deepened the more that I studied. And this has in fact become my method of wisdom, which is listening to God, knowing when it's God who's giving me something, knowing that God is the one who gave me an idea that came down on me like from heaven above in a flash of light. Something that I would never have thought about. In fact, sometimes I'll see God like kind of tapping me on the shoulder with an idea and showing me something over and over for a couple of days. And I'll be like, okay, I don't know that it's God talking to me at that moment. I just, like, what does that have to do with anything? I'll, kind of swat it out of my consciousness until finally I get it. I'll see like it all comes together and synchronizes into this huge picture that suddenly makes sense. And that's a flash of revelation. There is the feelings in my heart. Will pursuing some path, does it fill me with joy and wonder and hope and faith, and possibly a little bit of awe in that, how will I do it? Or I should do it because, the world's tough and everything else. So God speaks to us through our heart. Another wisdom and knowledge scripture from Proverbs 2:10. When wisdom enters your heart and knowledge delights your soul, then shall counsel preserve you, and understanding shall keep you, and deliver you from the evil way that speaks perverse and fraudulent things, and from them that leave the ways of righteousness to walk in the ways of darkness. When the Bible talks about a hard heart, it's talking about a heart that is concerned with worldly things. And that heart can't hear wisdom. It can only recognize the wisdom of the world. And that always will bring fear and doubt with it. So I encourage you this week that you choose joy as a value to orient to, and begin practicing hearing God's wisdom in your heart, through your heart, and walking in the Spirit in this way. What is your takeaway today? What are you going to do differently this week? What belief might have shifted here for you today? I'm so glad you joined me this week. Join me next week for another signal. See you then.